The defendant's motion to vacate the judgment of conviction is granted.
Finally, freedom for David Ranta, a man who spent the last 23 years of his life behind bars for a crime he likely didn't commit.
Sir, you are free to go.
A free man who never has to return to his 6x9 cell in a Buffalo maximum security prison.
As I said from the beginning, I had nothing to do with this case.
Despite a lack of physical evidence and an eyewitness who insisted Ranta wasn't the killer, in 1991, Ranta was sentenced to 37 years in prison. Ranta's appeals went nowhere until the district attorney's conviction integrity unit became involved. After its year-long investigation, prosecutors agreed that Ranta should be freed.
You know, I'm not sure about those claps there, only because I feel strange about celebrating a person that was wrongfully convicted. You know, it is exciting that they're free, you know, that this person is now out. And we're seeing this more and more where people who have been convicted and served 20 and 30 years in prison, they're now free. But should we really be celebrating a broken judicial system? You know, it is great that they're free, but they should never have been in jail in the first place. In many of these cases, they should never have been in jail. Derek Hamilton, 49, Brooklyn man, you know, his sentence was vacated and he has been set free after almost 30 years in prison. And this is just sort of a continuing narrative in the case of Louis Scarcella, former NYPD Brooklyn police officer. You know, he's retired now, but all of the cases that he was involved in, they're now under investigation. They're being forced to take a look at them again because so much evidence has come out showing that his tactics and his methods were basically illegal. You know, you've got it all here. You've got an officer who's being accused of witness tampering, forcing confessions. And here's the thing. This officer had a lifelong career in the NYPD. You know, this happened over a series of decades. And there is a list of people who are just now, after years in prison, they are just now getting free. And look at this. New York is starting to pay out settlements so that they don't have to go to trial and run the risk of having to pay out even more. Just recently, 3 brothers who were wrongfully convicted, Al Avina Jeanette, Robert Hill, and Daryl Alston, each of them spent years in prison, and they have now had their convictions. About a year ago, they had their convictions vacated, and just recently they were awarded $17 million. And these brothers were also victims of Louis Scarcella styled investigations, you know. And actually, I'm sorry, let me say that again. They were actually, Louis Scarcella was the police officer involved in their cases. And $17 million, you know, while that may seem like a lot of money to some people, you have to understand these brothers lost their lives, you know, their best years in prison. And one of the brothers died in prison. So the settlement had to go to his estate. And here's the thing. I don't want to make everything black and white, and I'm sure I'll be accused of doing that. But some of the people who are just now being freed, they are white. But the majority of them are black. The overwhelming majority of the people being exonerated are black. I mean, some people are bound to try to dismiss this officer and his actions as an outlier, as some type of an anomaly. But you have to understand, this is occurring too many times to think of it as something strange or unusual. They look at this. They were so casual about some of these cases that they recycled what are now considered to be fake eyewitness testimony. In other words, they put up the same witness to identify different suspects. I mean, that's cavalier. That's just casual. That means you're used to doing this type of thing. And so it can't be viewed as an anomaly because this is a systemic problem. You know, you don't have a lifelong career in the system behaving in this manner without someone noticing what's going on. Somebody had to know about the forced convictions. The forced confessions. Somebody had to know about the fake witnesses. Somebody had to have noticed that the same witnesses were being used in multiple cases. You know, somebody saw this going on. And it's kind of like the Ferguson case. And I know everybody is tired of talking about Ferguson. Hell, I'm tired of talking about it. It's draining. But the prosecutor came out after the fact and admitted to putting up a known liar who he knew this person was not telling the truth. Listen to this.
And it was on, it went both directions. There's talk of one witness now, and some of the media is doing exactly what I said they would do. They pull out one witness and just latch on to that. And this was a lady who clearly wasn't present when this occurred. And she recounted the statement that was, right out of the newspaper about, Wilson's actions, and right down the line with Wilson's actions, even though I'm sure she was nowhere near the place.
What? Right. So you put up a witness who corroborates the testimony of the police officer, even though you know she was nowhere near the place. All it takes is one witness to validate what jurors feel in their gut. And some of them realize this, and they're willing to use it as a means of getting convictions. Or in the case of Ferguson, they're willing to do it to make sure that they don't bring something to trial. I mean, it goes both ways. They can manipulate the system because they're embedded in the system. They're ingrained in the system. And before you start yelling that oh, that's a conspiracy, and no, I don't deal in conspiracies. This is truth. Look at what is happening in New York right now. This police officer, Scarcella, his behavior, his actions have led to the overturning of numerous convictions, and not just the vacating of convictions, but also the awarding of settlements so that the people would not sue. This is not an isolated, you do not get away with this for so long without people knowing about it. You cannot, and if they don't speak up about it, then they're complicit with it. And they know all it takes is for one witness to validate what they are feeling in their gut, and the jury will go in the direction that they want it to go. If they've got a gut feeling, if they look at a person and they feel like that person could be guilty or that person is a thug, if they look at them, then they can say, all I need is one witness. Just give me one witness, and I can ignore everybody else. Everybody else who says Wilson's hands were, who said Brown's hands were up. We can ignore all of them. Just give us one witness that's going to tell us the same story that Darren Wilson told. In the New York case, Scarcella used GQ magazine did some research on it, and they referred to the witness as a crackhead prostitute. The same crackhead prostitute, these are their words, not mine. The same person was used in multiple cases to secure convictions, later on recanting their testimony. But this is after people have spent half of their life in prison. Some of them have died in prison. The same methodology we see happening across the country. We see in Ferguson, we saw that they put up Sandra McElroy, a known, listen, she was known to have lied in previous cases, but they put her up because she corroborated everything that Darren Wilson said. And she said that she was there. And I quote, "I seen the shot." Problem was, she was nowhere near the location. And the prosecutor knew this, but put her up anyway. Our system is so convoluted and is so structured against the average man that, do you realize we almost didn't find out about Miss Sandra McElroy? because of the way the grand jury system works, we weren't supposed to know who the witnesses were. And if it was not for the investigative efforts of some reporters, we would not have known that witness 40 was actually Sandra McElroy, who was a known liar, and that the prosecutors knew was lying, but put up anyway. I mentioned Ferguson in light of the NYPD, those convictions in New York, because you have to understand the relationship between prosecutors and the police. There are very few, if any, checks and balances between these two entities. They are there to help each other. They are there to get convictions. So without question, there is a naturally close relationship that forms between these two departments. It's understandable. It's bound to happen. So anytime you have a police officer charged with a crime, you can guarantee that the DA has a conflict of interest. But we allow them to put on a show for us and then call it justice. Or anytime, like in the case of New York, you have a police officer who puts forward questionable evidence. If it secures a conviction, that police officer is not by himself in this. We can't just look at Louis Scarcella and say he was one bad cop, because he wasn't the one who tried the case. He wasn't the one that served on the jury. He wasn't the one who presented the evidence to the jury. So it's not just one person. We can't say that the system would be fixed if we just got rid of the Louis Scarcellas. No, you have to look at the entire system. You have to look at the DA, you have to look at the judge, you have to look at the entire system, because somewhere in there is a potential for a conflict of interest. But we allow them to put on a show for us and then call it justice. Justice isn't putting up fake witnesses to get convictions when you want them. Justice isn't putting up fake witnesses to clear officers when you want them cleared. Justice isn't forcing confessions out of innocent men who are later exonerated. I mean, think about that for a minute. Police officers are able to get confessions out of men who later we find out were innocent. These are systemic problems, meaning that our entire system is messed up. You don't have a lifelong career in the judicial system without someone noticing the discrepancies, without somebody noticing your misconduct. Somebody knew about this. Somebody knew about the fake witnesses. Somebody knew about the forced confessions. And here's, you know what? I'm going to address this when we come back from the break. We'll be right back.
Give us a call, 857-600-0518. It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I'm your host, Benjamin Dixon. Buckle up for the ride. So we're dealing with this Louis Scarcella out of New York, who has multiple convictions that he investigated as a police officer being overturned because of his misconduct, his alleged misconduct. But the discrepancies are so glaring that case after case after case is being overturned. They're having these convictions. They've spent 20 and 30 years in prison, and they're having these convictions vacated. In fact, it's not just that. They're going one step further. The city of New York is awarding them settlements so that they can avoid going to trial for potentially greater losses, greater settlements. And so something is obviously going on there, and people may want to dismiss this officer by himself. But I want to just, you can't do something for an entire career and no one noticed. Someone noticed what was going on. And he was not this officer. No matter what he did wrong, He was not the one who presented the cases. He was not the one who served on the juries, and he was not the judge in the cases. Someone, somewhere along the line knew about what this guy was doing, and they were complicit with it. So that speaks to the fact that our system as a whole has problem. It's problematic, and it has problems. In that, how can someone get away with things that he's being accused of for so long, which have led to the convictions of so many people who now we believe are most likely innocent? And here's the other thing. You know, at the core of this, there are a lot of people who want to dismiss the protests that we see in Ferguson, and they want to dismiss the entire Black Lives Matter movement, and they want to dismiss it because they're tired of the race conversation, and they're tired of being told that the system is racist. But here's the thing. At the core of this really isn't a race issue. It's not. At the core of this is about our broken criminal justice system. And that affects us all. Regardless of your skin color, you will be and are affected by this broken system that we call the justice system. And keep in mind, you have to understand that these systemic injustices, they are exasperated in the Black community. They are magnified. We are disproportionately targeted because of the social economic disparities. In other words, Black Americans experience this as racism because it disproportionately affects us. And so while we may be saying racism, what we're really saying is that this system is broken and it is hitting us harder than anyone else. But the truth of the matter is, even though the problem may be felt disproportionately in the Black community, it will eventually be felt in every community. King said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Which is why I cannot, for the life of me, understand all of these pseudo warriors, justice warriors, who are running around crying that the police state is coming. And they can say in one breath, they will say that the criminal justice system is corrupt and that the police are getting out of control and that the police state is coming. But then when they see actual evidence of abuse in communities of color, they dismiss it as nothing, or they dismiss it as Black people doing something to earn the treatment that they get by the same police that they think are corrupt. It doesn't make sense to me. How can you say in one breath, how can you clearly see that there's a broken criminal justice system, but when it comes to the Black experience, you dismiss it as, oh, that's not racism. Oh, there's no, that guy was a thug. When in actuality, we see in case after case after case where Black men have been either exonerated or those convictions have been vacated for crimes that they most likely did not commit. We see false testimony being used to convict them. We see police officers now having an entire career being put to shame because of their actions after an entire career of arresting people who now, many of them, we consider are most likely innocent. Then they put up witnesses to validate this often unspoken bias against us. And then you have the nerve to call it justice. Listen, folks, this affects every single one of us. I don't care what race you are. It affects every community. I don't care where you live. Look at the case out in Pennsylvania where judges were selling convictions to private prison developers. Listen, one judge, I believe it was Mike Conahan, he was a judge that made sure that the juvenile system run by the state was shut down, so that juveniles had to be shipped out to a private facility. Then you had another judge who was actually selling convictions, getting kickbacks from private prison developers, getting money to convict children of crimes and send them to the private facilities. Both of those judges are now in jail. So while you're trying to protect the flaws in the system because you think that that black man or that black kid must have done something wrong, he must have been a thug, understand that these were not black kids that were being sold. These were everyone's kids. These were black and white. So remember that the same system that you dismiss as innocent when it regards to black lives is the same system that is capable and actually guilty of selling your kids to private prisons. It is the same crooked route that runs throughout all of it. And if you can't see the problem just because it involves a minority group, then you have unknowingly become a part of that problem. But the sad irony of it all is that the same people you protect in one scenario are the same people. It is the same system that will attack you in another scenario. So what do? I mean, at a minimum, at a bare minimum, we need to start demanding more oversight and accountability. Special prosecutors need to come in whenever someone from within the system is suspected of a crime. Prosecutors and police have, and unfortunately some judges, are all one big family. Now ask yourself a question. Would you not find a way to make sure your family members got out of trouble if they ever got into trouble? What do you think? Give me a call. 857-600-0518. We'll be right back after this.